a man whom no one has called in 7 months, and a nurse who says goodbye to him every night. One morning, as she was saying goodbye to the comatose patient, she heard his voice and reached out to him, shocking the patient. Shortly after, a single-sentence letter found in the lining of his coat would reveal both a lost love and a hidden crime. Don't leave, and stay with us until the end. The hospital corridor was almost empty. The cold lights flickered slowly, casting shadows on the pale walls. The sound of the clock in the reception area marked the end of another shift. It was one of those early mornings that seemed to never end. Paola walked slowly, adjusting her wrinkled gown, her body tired, her feet aching, but her heart was restless. There was something she always did before leaving, something no one asked her to do, but she couldn't stop doing. She stood in front of door 312. The room was silent. The curtains were half open, letting in the dim light from the street lamp. On the bed was the same man as always, Leandro Godoy, in his 30s, with a handsome but tired face. 7 months in a coma, no family, no friends, no visitors, just her. Paola took a deep breath and entered. The smell of alcohol and medicine was the same as every day, but inside, time seemed to stand still. Only the beeping of the monitor reminded her that he was still there, alive in some way. She approached the bed, adjusted the sheet to cover his chest, and ran her hand through his hair with a care that seemed motherly. "Good night, Leandro," she murmured with a tired voice. "Last round of the day, eh? One more night. You and I want to give up on you, but as long as I can, I'll come." She smiled to herself, that sad smile of someone who no longer expects an answer, but speaks anyway. Today was tough. 3 deliveries, a woman in crisis, and a new doctor who won't shut up. She paused, but then said, "I came because I won't leave you alone. I won't leave you." Paola pulled up a chair, sat down next to the bed, and stared at his chest as it rose and fell slowly. His face seemed calm, almost at peace, but it was impossible not to imagine what was going on inside that head. Would he dream? Would he hear? "You know, Leandro," she said softly, "sometimes I think you do hear me. I talk, and it seems like the air changes a little when I'm here. Maybe it's just me, but it doesn't matter." She rested her elbow on the edge of the bed, holding his hand. It was warm, different from what she expected. "It's been almost 7 months, you know." 7, she sighed. "Some people think it's a waste of time coming here, but I don't think so." His eyes were tired but full of affection, because we never know what's going on in someone's heart, even if they seem asleep. A cart noise sounded in the hallway. Another nurse passed by and greeted her from afar. "Paola, your shift is over. Go get some rest. I'll be right there," Marta said. "Just 1 more minute." She turned back to him. "Okay, I'm leaving," she said, squeezing his hand gently. "But tomorrow I'll be back, and I want to see you better. Promise." The clock read 5:12. 12 outside. Dawn was breaking. The orange light of the sun slowly entered. Touching Leandro's face, she held his hand with both of hers, as if she were holding something very fragile that she couldn't let go of. She sighed, her eyes filled with tears without realizing it. "You know, Leandro, sometimes I think you do it on purpose, that you stay silent just to test me." She forced a smile, "But I'm not leaving without saying the usual." She ran her thumb slowly over his fingers, slowly, as if praying. "Come back soon," she said softly. "Don't leave me talking to myself." Silence answered her again. She took a deep breath and was about to let go of his hand as she got up. That's when she felt it, a slight touch, almost nothing, a different kind of warmth. Her heart stopped and began to beat fast. She turned slowly. His hand had moved for a second. She thought it was her imagination. She turned back and took it again. His skin was warm, alive. Leandro whispered with a trembling voice, "Did you hear me?" His hand squeezed hers, gently but firmly. Paola stood still. Time stood still. The sound of the monitor grew louder. Her breathing became short. "My God," she murmured, staring at him. "Leandro, do it again, please." She waited a second, 2 seconds, nothing, but she was sure she had felt it. It was real. "Help!" she shouted, her voice full of fear and hope. "Someone come!" Footsteps sounded in the hallway. 2 nurses and a doctor rushed in. "What happened, Paola?" asked the doctor, adjusting his glasses. He moved his hand. I swear when I spoke to him, he squeezed my hand. The doctor looked at the monitor. Everything is normal. Pressure stable. Heartbeat steady. Calm down, Paola. It could have been a reflex. It happens sometimes. It wasn't a reflex, she said, her eyes filled with tears. I felt it. It was different, he replied. For the first time, the doctor nodded, signaling for them to check his vital signs. Light in the eyes, reflexes, breathing, everything the same. Look, everything is stable. No changes. Paola was still there, not letting go of his hand, her heart beating very fast. I know this man, doctor. I come here every day. He had never moved like that before, the doctor replied, sighing. Sometimes the body reacts to external stimuli. Paola, don't get your hopes up, yes. She remained silent, but inside, something burned. They didn't feel what I felt, she thought. It was a touch, a sign, a response. The doctor and the other nurses left the room. Silence returned. Paola stayed there, still holding his hand. If it was a reflex, she said softly, let it be the reflex of life returning. A tear fell down her face and onto his hand. At that moment, the sun was shining through the window, illuminating the room as if saying something. She woke up here in the hospital archives. Leandro's file was almost a mystery. Erased letters, blank spaces, and a faded child-sized photo stuck on its side. Leandro Godoy, it said, and nothing else. No phone number, no address, no signature from a family member. Paola always thought it was strange. 7 months in the hospital, and no one ever showed up. No relatives, no friends, no one asking if he was still alive. It was as if the world had forgotten that this man existed. That gray morning, she stood in front of his bed, trying to understand who that still body was, with a face so peaceful and yet so full of marks. A small scar on his chin, another near his eyebrow, and a simple silver ring on his finger. But it wasn't just any ring. Inside, the letters AR were delicately engraved. Paola turned the ring slowly between her fingers. AR. Who could you be, eh? Leandro. She remembered the first time she saw him months ago. His body arrived on a stretcher covered in dried blood, his face swollen. It had been a horrible accident. At the time, the paramedics said that the car had overturned on the old road near kilometer 42. It was raining heavily, and the car veered off the road and crashed into a tree. There were 4 young people inside. 2 died instantly, and 1 survived, injured but conscious. The other survivor was Leandro Godoy. The survivor, whose name was Marcos, said he didn't know Leandro well. They said they were coming back from a party, that everyone had been drinking, that he had asked for a ride at the last minute, and that no one knew where he lived. Only the driver was a close friend of his, and that's why he knew his name was Leandro Godoy. Paola read the police report many times, trying to understand everything. It was all there, dry, emotionless, patient, found unconscious conscious, no documents, serious condition, identified by witness as Leandro Godoy, no family contacts located. She closed the folder slowly, her heart heavy. How can someone live like that without leaving a trace? She said softly, with no one to miss him. She walked over to the bed and looked at him again, his hand still, his face calm, as if he were sleeping a dreamless sleep. You must have had someone, she whispered. No one disappears from the world just like that. She remembered that in the early days a police officer had stopped by. He stayed only a short time and asked if the young man had reacted, if he had woken up. When she said no, he simply replied, "Then there's not much we can do. Without documents or family, it's almost impossible to know who he was." And he left. Since then, the name Leandro Godoy was all she had, a name lost in the wind. Paola sat on the edge of the bed and lovingly stroked his forehead. "Leandro, who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What happened that night?" She was silent for a while, listening only to the sound of the heart monitor. Outside, a light rain began to fall. The sound of water hitting the window made the room even sadder. She looked at the ring again. The letters glowed under the hospital light. "There must be someone waiting for you, you know," she said, her eyes filled with tears. "Someone who has no idea you're here." A lump formed in her throat. It was difficult to accept that a human being could be forgotten like that. Before leaving the room, Paola left the ring on the small table next to the medical file, and before turning off the light, looked at it one more time. One day, Leandro, someone will appear, and when they do, they will call you by your real name. She paused, her voice breaking, and I want to be here to see it. The door closed slowly, and the room returned to silence. Only the rain outside, cleaning the glass, seemed to answer for him. The afternoon was slowly drawing to a close, and the hospital seemed frozen in time. Paola was alone in the room of forgotten objects, that small, enclosed space filled with boxes marked with the names of people who could no longer claim anything. Each box was an interrupted life. She went to the back shelf and took out the one with a handwritten label, Leandro Godoy. The cardboard cover creaked when she opened it. Inside, there were only a few hastily folded clothes, stained with blood and torn, a broken watch, and a dark coat stained with mud and smelling of old rain. Paola ran her fingers over the fabric, feeling the weight of time. It was strange to touch the belongings of someone who could no longer say anything. "What a mystery you are, Leandro," she murmured, placing the coat on the table as she examined it. She noticed something in the lining, a small lump like a hidden piece of paper. She frowned, slipped her fingers inside, and carefully pulled it out. It was a crumpled envelope, folded many times. The paper was already yellowed, the edges hard, and there was a slight smell of wet earth. There was nothing written on the front, just an old stamp mark. Paola sat down, rested the envelope in her hands, and took a deep breath. She could feel her heart beating faster. It was as if that piece of paper held a piece of Leandro's soul. She carefully opened the flap and took out a sheet of paper torn from a notebook, written in blue pen. The handwriting was beautiful but shaky, as if it had been written through tears. The words were in Spanish. "Alicia, forgive me. I always loved you." Just that, a short sentence, but one that said so much. Paola stood still, looking at those letters, and felt a lump in her throat. Alicia repeated softly, "So there is someone." She turned the page, looking for something else. Nothing. No address, no date, just that apology. She left the paper on the table and stared into space, trying to imagine who Alicia might be. Wife, girlfriend, sister, someone he loved and lost. The sound of the clock on the wall seemed louder now, each tick echoing like a memory. Paola brought the letter to her face, and the damp smell of the paper made her close her eyes for a moment. She imagined Leandro writing those words, perhaps crying, perhaps regretful, perhaps too cowardly to deliver them. "Forgive me. I always loved you," she repeated softly, her voice breaking. "Damn it, Leandro. What did you do to have to ask for forgiveness like this?" She sat there for a while, thinking. The whole hospital was silent, only the wind outside banging on the windows. Suddenly, something inside her ignited, an impulse, almost a voice. What if she's still out there? Paola grabbed the envelope again, ran her fingers over the name, Alicia. "Maybe she does exist," she murmured, "and maybe she needs to know that he's still alive." She put the letter back in the envelope, slipped it into her robe pocket, and left the room. As she walked down the hallway, her heart was pounding. It was no longer just curiosity. It was something bigger, a quiet certainty that that old piece of paper could change everything. Deep down, she felt that maybe it was time to look for that woman, that Alicia who somehow still lived inside a man whom the whole world believed to be unconscious. The next morning was cold, with a wind that cut into the faces of those who entered through the automatic door. Paola was arranging the forms at the reception desk when she heard hurried footsteps and a whispered, "Excuse me," as if the person were afraid to speak loudly and make their heart beat faster. The woman was pale, her eyes red, her hair tied back haphazardly, a simple coat, her hand trembling as she searched for something in her bag and found nothing because what she was looking for was not paper, it was courage. "Good morning," said Paola, noticing her distressed expression. "Can I help you?" The woman took a deep breath, like someone jumping into the water before crossing the river. "My name is Alicia Reyes." Her voice came out low and broken. "Excuse me, the patient Leandro Godoy." The name fell into the air like a glass that almost fell off the table. Paola took a second to respond. Her heart beat fast. but her face remained calm. Yes, he's here. Careful with every word. Do you know him? Alicia put her hand to her mouth, holding back the tears that were already coming. I think so, she said, almost without a voice. I can see him. Paola felt slowly and invited her with her hand. The two walked silently down the long hallway, each step echoing. The clock struck 09:12. Cold light streamed through the tall windows, drawing rectangles on the floor. Outside, the sky was dark gray. They stopped in front of door 312. Before opening it, Paola looked at Alicia carefully. He's in a coma, she said softly, so as not to hurt her. It's been a long time, but he's here. He breathes. He hears the world in his own way. Alicia closed her eyes for a moment, then nodded. Paola opened the door. The room was silent. The beep of the monitor marked a steady, stubborn rhythm. Leandro was motionless, his face thinner, his hands on the sheet. Alicia took 2 steps, then stopped, her lips trembling. Is it him? The question came out like a sob. Is it him? Paola stayed a step behind, saying nothing, because sometimes silence is kinder. Alicia approached the bed, her previously tense face crumbling. Tears came softly, as if traveling the road back from many years. Alicia whispered, almost without a voice, "My love." She reached out her hand, but stopped it in the air as if afraid to touch and break something sacred. Then she gently touched his face, his chin where the skin had a thin scar. The gesture was like coming home after a long time. "Goodbye. It's you." He laughed without joy, a sad laugh. Paola carefully pulled up a chair. "Please sit down," she said softly. "Stay as long as you need to." Alicia sat down, her eyes never leaving him, as if she were afraid that if she blinked, he would disappear again. Her hand sought his, and found it. Leandro's fingers were warm. "Forgive me, Leandro," she whispered. "I'm late." Paola remained there discreetly, her heart tightened by witnessing this encounter that the world seemed to have denied for so long. She waited until Alicia was breathing more easily. "Is he family?" Alicia wiped her tears with the back of her hand. "We were going to get married." The words came out broken. More than 3 years ago, everything was ready. The church, the flowers, the dress. She swallowed her words. The air in the room became thicker. Paola nodded her head in sympathy, and silence fell. The word fell heavily. The day before, without warning, without a message, he disappeared. Many said he ran away, that he wasn't going to change, that alcohol was stronger than anything. Silence. The beep of the monitor remained faithful, as if keeping time for them. "I heard so many ugly things," Alicia said slowly. "He left. It's not worth it. Forget it." She closed her eyes, but inside, she put her hand to her chest. Something told me that wasn't it, that something was wrong. Paola felt a chill. She remembered the envelope in her pocket, the damp paper of memories. She approached and spoke softly, like someone offering water to someone who has been thirsty for years. Alicia called out carefully, "I found something among his things." Alicia looked at her with tearful, attentive eyes. Paola took the crumpled envelope out of her pocket and placed it tenderly in Alicia's hand, as if returning a piece of life. It was in his coat. "I think it was for you." Alicia held the envelope as if it were a wounded bird. She opened it slowly. As she read the sentence, her shoulders slumped. A sob rose without warning. "Alicia, forgive me. I always loved you," she repeated with a broken voice. He tried to say the phrase, but it died in a deep, restrained cry that came from the soul. Paola moved closer and put her hand on his back in a gesture of comfort. "He tried," she said simply. "I don't know how or when, but he tried." Alicia looked up at Leandro. There was a mixture of pain and relief on her face. Pain for everything that was lost. Relief at knowing that it was not a lie or abandonment, but love, asking for forgiveness. "I waited for you," she murmured, running her fingers through his hair. "I didn't know how, but I waited for you here." She touched his chest with anger, with faith, with fear, but she waited for him. The wind outside hit the window, and the glass made a slight sound inside the room. Only Leandro's breathing, Alicia's, and the silent presence of Paola carefully mending 2 broken pieces. "Do you want to stay alone with him for a while?" Paola asked respectfully. Alicia felt it, but held Paola's arm for a moment. "Thank you for finding this, for not finishing it. She couldn't. Her eyes said the rest. Paola smiled with her eyes. I only brought what was already yours. She took a step back but stayed close, discreet, in case the woman needed someone. Alicia looked at Leandro again. Everyone said you left, she whispered firmly, as if putting things in order. You escaped because you couldn't give up alcohol. She closed her eyes, a quiet tear falling, but I always felt something else. She placed the letter on his chest, on top of the sheet, as if returning a name to its owner. I'm here, she said softly. Whenever you want to come back, I'm here. Paola closed the curtain a little so that the light wouldn't disturb the room. It became softer. Alicia intertwined her fingers with his and tilted her head, resting her forehead on Leandro's hand. There was no rush, only presence, only love that made no noise but remained. And in that silence filled with tears, the truth found its place. He had not run away from love. He had lost his way. The letter said so. Her gaze confirmed it. And now, even though there were no answers, Alicia was there, whole, as people are when they decide not to let go of the hand of the one they love. The afternoon was heavy with suffocating heat, and that smell of disinfectant mixed with sadness that only exists in hospitals. Paola and Alicia were sitting in a corner of the empty dining room, 2 cups of cold coffee between them, and a silence that weighed more than any words. Alicia spoke slowly, like someone walking through a field full of dangerous memories. He didn't talk much about his childhood. He started stirring his coffee without really wanting to drink it. He just said that his mother died young, and that one day his father just left. Paola looked at her in surprise. His father left him. Alicia felt that he had abandoned him when he was a child. His voice was low. He said he didn't even remember his face, only his name. I think it was Esteban Reyes or something like that. The name hung in the air. Paola felt a chill run down her spine. Paola asked, almost without meaning to, "Are you sure?" Alicia looked at him, without understanding why. Paola remained silent for a few seconds. Outside, the hospital went on with its routine. Footsteps, voices, life passing by. But inside her, something began to stir, a thought she didn't want to give shape to. Paola put the cup on the table and stared into space, her heart racing. Esteban Reyes was one of the doctors at the hospital. Serious, always distant, a man who almost never smiled. He had a reputation for being cold, but Paola knew that was just a shell. Inside, he carried a weight that no one saw. She took a deep breath. Alicia said slowly, "There's a doctor here with that name." Alicia looked up, confused. "It can't be," she murmured. "It must be a coincidence." But Paola felt that it wasn't. At the end of the afternoon, when the shift changed, she went to Dr. Esteban's office. He was in his white coat, filling out reports as usual. "Doctor?" she called hesitantly. "I need to talk to you." He looked up, tired but attentive. "Is there a problem, Paola?" She approached him. "It's about the patient in room 312. He frowned. "The young man in a coma. What's going on? That case isn't in my area." Paola held her breath for a moment before letting it out. "I think you need to see him." "See him? Why?" She looked away. "It's hard to explain, but there's something you need to know." Esteban put down his pen and sighed. "Paola, is this another one of those nurses' intuitions?" "No, please." She interrupted him in a firm but soft voice. "Trust me." The silence lasted a second, and then he got up. They walked side by side to the room. The door was ajar. Alicia was sitting next to the bed, holding Leandro's hand. When Esteban entered, Alicia looked up. Their eyes met, and for a moment time seemed to stand still. He approached curiously, stopped at the foot of the bed, looked at the patient, and then looked back at Paola, seeking an explanation. "Is it him?" he asked in a low voice, not knowing exactly what to ask. Alicia took a deep breath, her gaze trembling. "Yes," she replied, almost in a whisper. "Is it him?" Esteban paled, his face hardening, but his eyes said it all. He took a step back and muttered, "This can't be." Paola tried to approach him, but he raised his hand, asking for silence. "I know that name," he said, as if talking to himself. Esteban looked back at the man in the bed, and something inside him broke. His breathing became heavy. "Is he my son?" but no one had the courage to answer. Silence answered for them. Esteban brought his hand to his forehead, took 2 steps, stopped again, his face rigid, but his eyes full of tears. "My God," he whispered, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I never knew. And he was here in a coma all this time." Paula took a step, trying to reach him. "Doctor," but he was already turning away. "I can't," he murmured, clutching his gown. "I can't be here," and he left. The door closed slowly behind him. Alicia stood there looking confused, lost between surprise and sadness. Paula leaned against the wall and took a deep breath, trying not to cry. "He never got over what he went through," she said quietly. "He blames himself for everything." Outside, the sound of Esteban's footsteps receded down the hallway until they disappeared, and the room returned to its usual silence. But now it was a different kind of silence, the kind that comes after a truth that changes everything, even though no one knows yet how to deal with it. Night fell over the hospital like a heavy blanket. The hallways were empty, and the sound of the clock was too loud. Esteban hadn't been able to go home since the moment he saw Leandro lying in that bed. Something inside him wouldn't stop hurting. He spent hours locked in the small doctor's office, the white light from the lamp shining on the papers scattered across the desk. He tried to understand what didn't make sense. The accident reports, the files, the paramedics' notes, everything was there, and at the same time, nothing was there. Something was wrong. He picked up one of the sheets, written in a hurry. Vehicle overturned after side collision. Signs of skidding. Wet road. He read it over and over again, tapping his finger on the table restlessly. That doesn't explain it. He opened the drawer and took out an old, almost forgotten folder. Inside were copies of the police report. The paper was yellowed with coffee stains. There was a photo of the wrecked car taken at the edge of the road. Inside were copies of the police report. The paper was yellowed with coffee stains. There was a photo of the wrecked car taken at the side of the road. The headlights were broken, the roof was caved in, and the tire tracks didn't look like they were from skidding. They were parallel, as if another vehicle had pushed the car into the ravine. Esteban frowned. "This was a chase," he whispered. He grabbed the phone and thought about calling the police station, but stopped. His chest felt heavy. He sat there, staring blankly at the photo. "Who would do this to him?" he murmured, his voice breaking. "And why?" He opened another document, a short statement from a witness. "I heard the sound of 2 cars accelerating around the curve, then silence." Esteban's heart began to beat faster. This was no ordinary accident. He closed his eyes and buried his face in his hands. His head was spinning. Memories came flooding back like waves. His son's face when he was a child. The last day he saw him. The moment he decided to leave to protect his family from his own misery. Now he felt like the same cowardly man he had been before. A father who ran away. A doctor who failed. He jumped up, opened the file, and began pulling out everything he could find on the case. Medical reports, tests, reports. The more he read, the more his hands trembled. There were notes that didn't match. Different times, changed names, torn pages. "This is wrong," he said angrily, with a lump in his throat. "Or did they do it to hide something?" He grabbed the photo of Leandro taken the day he was admitted, his face injured, but there was something in his expression, even unconscious, that seemed to be asking for help. "What were you trying to tell me, son?" he said softly, without noticing the tear that fell. "What did they do to you that night?" The clock read almost 2 in the morning. Outside, it was starting to rain. The sound of the drops hitting the window made him close his eyes for a moment. He sat down again, tired, and stared into space. The silence of the hospital seemed to speak to him. "You left, Esteban, huh? And now the world brought you back to fix what you left behind." He grabbed the final police report and ran his finger over a sentence written in pencil, almost erased. Driver found unconscious. Signs of side impact. Possible intentional collision. That word, intentional, burned in his mind. He got up, walked to the window, and saw the city below covered in rain, the glass fogged up with his breath. "Someone wanted to silence you, Leandro," he said in a hoarse voice. "And I wasn't even there to protect you. His hand trembled as he gripped the edge of the window. He knew that somehow he had to find out the truth, not out of curiosity, but because he owed it to his son. He returned to the desk, gathered all the papers, and put them in a folder. On the top, he wrote in black pen, "Leandro Godoy case, personal review." He closed the metal clasp, took a deep breath, and looked at the clock. It was 2:43 in the morning. The hospital was asleep, but he knew he would never sleep the same again. Before turning off the light, he looked once more at the photo of the wrecked car. He ran his finger over it carefully, as if he could somehow touch his son through time. "I'm going to find out what happened to you," he promised. "Even if it hurts, even if it destroys me." And he stayed there alone with the folder pressed against his chest while the rain beat against the glass, each drop seeming like a regret that came too late. It was one of those early mornings when the hospital seems to breathe slowly with the sound of the machines and the wind hitting the windows like a distant whisper. The hallways were empty. The floor shone under the cold light. Esteban walked slowly, hugging a folder to his chest. His footsteps sounded like heavy heartbeats full of guilt. He stopped in front of door 312 and stood there for a moment, looking at the metal plaque with the name Leandro Godoy. He took a deep breath, as if he were about to jump into an abyss. He pushed the door open slowly. The room was in darkness, only the constant beeping of the monitor breaking the silence. Leandro slept with a peaceful face, his body still, the sheet rising and falling to the slow rhythm of his breathing. Esteban took a few steps until he was next to the bed. He looked at his son for a long time, as if he wanted to remember every detail. His dark hair, his pale skin, the same curve of his chin that he remembered seeing in a child many years ago. He sat down in the chair next to the bed, his hands trembling. Time seemed to stand still. "I don't know where to start," he said in a low, hoarse voice. "Maybe you won't even hear me. Maybe nothing will change, but I needed to come." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and continued. "I was a bad father." His voice broke. "A coward. When your mother died, I couldn't take it. I lost myself. I drank. And when I realized it, you no longer looked at me with love, only with fear." He paused, his throat tight. He ran his hand over his face, trying not to cry. "And I left you. I left you alone with anger, with pain. I told myself it was for the best, that you would have peace, that someone would love you, but it was a lie. I just ran away." The beep of the monitor continued steadily. Outside, the wind made the glass vibrate. Esteban leaned a little closer, almost touching his son's hand with his forehead. "I spent years pretending it didn't hurt, hiding behind my scrubs, behind the overtime shifts. But the truth is," his voice broke again, "I never stopped thinking about you. Never." The tears began to fall silently. I wiped them away without stopping talking. "When I saw you lying here, I felt ashamed." He let out a sad laugh. A doctor incapable of caring for his own son. His own son. The room seemed to hear every word. It floated in the heavy air, mixed with the sound of the machines. "If you can hear me," Leandro said, almost in a whisper, "I needed to ask for your forgiveness." He fell silent. The silence was so deep that it seemed to have a life of its own. Suddenly, something changed. A different sound, soft, a sigh. Esteban opened his eyes. He thought he had imagined it. He moved closer, his heart racing. Leandro called out, almost without a voice. The monitor was still normal, but his son's fingers moved slightly. He held his breath. "Leandro, if it's you, give me a sign." Time stretched out slowly, like a thread about to break. Then Leandro's lips parted slightly, and an almost imperceptible sound came out. His head turned slightly, and in a moment that seemed like an eternity, his eyelids fluttered, and his cloudy, confused eyes opened, focused on Esteban's face. The father brought his hands to his mouth, unable to believe it. "My God," he murmured, choked up. "My son." A tear fell from Leandro's eye, slowly rolling down onto the pillow. Esteban moved closer and grabbed his hand tightly. "I'm here, son." His voice was pure emotion. "Please forgive me." Leandro couldn't speak, but his eyes said it all. In that gaze, there was pain, there was lost time, but there was also something that Esteban hadn't seen in a long time: recognition. The father rested his forehead on his son's hand and cried silently. like a scoundrel who had finally found his way back home. Outside, dawn was beginning to break. The soft light of sunrise entered the room and touched Leandro's face, and for a moment everything seemed to stop. Time, guilt, fear. Only that moment existed, a father asking for forgiveness, and a son opening his eyes to life again. The beep of the monitor remained steady. The air felt lighter. Esteban looked at the sky through the window and whispered in a trembling voice, almost like a prayer, "My God, thank you for one more chance." And he stayed there, holding his son's hand, feeling that perhaps, for the first time, the silence of the hospital was no longer empty. It was the sound of life returning slowly but surely. The following days were a silent whirlwind inside the hospital. Room 312 was no longer the same. The air felt different, more alive, but also heavier. Paola, Alicia, and Esteban took turns at Leandro's side. He was now breathing without machines, still weak, but present. His gaze followed the sound of voices, as if trying to piece together the fragments of a forgotten life. One afternoon, as the fine rain tapped on the glass, Paola entered the medical records room. The dim light from the lamp flickered, and the smell of paper and old dust filled the air. She searched through folders, reports, and yellowed papers for something that would explain what had really happened that night. She found a sealed folder with the name of an old company, Transportes del Valle, in the corner, and the name of the person in charge, Ramiro Ortega, the same man Leandro had mentioned months earlier in one of his medical notes, something no one had noticed until now. Paola took the document to Esteban, who was sitting in the doctor's room. He looked up wearily and read slowly, his face becoming more serious with each line. "That man," he said, clutching the paper. "I remember him. He was the owner of the company where Leandro worked." Alicia, who was near the door, heard the name and approached. "Ramiro Ortega?" she asked, her face pale. "Of course," Leandro told me. She sat down, her voice trembling. He said his boss did bad things. Stole gasoline, diverted trucks, forged signatures. Leandro wanted to report it but stopped himself, tears welling up. But no one believed him. They said he drank too much, that it was a drunken story. Esteban closed his eyes, feeling the weight in his chest, then tried to report it himself. Paola added in a low voice that someone silenced him. Silence fell over the three of them. The distant sound of the monitors in the hallway set the rhythm of the pain that was felt there. Esteban opened the folder again. At the bottom was a copy of a police report with the date of the accident. The report said the driver crashed after being followed by an unidentified vehicle. The case was closed due to lack of evidence. His hands were shaking. "They chased him," he said in a broken voice, "and no one did anything." Alicia covered her face with her hands. "My God, he tried to do the right thing and paid the price." Paola took a deep breath, sitting down next to him. He was alone. Alicia tried to be brave, but she had no one with her. Esteban looked at the floor. The rain hit the window harder, as if the world outside was also crying. "He drank to escape himself," said the doctor quietly. "And yet he tried to do the right thing, and I wasn't there to help." No one said anything. After a while, Paola got up and looked at them. "Do you realize?" she asked. "Leandro wasn't just the victim of an accident. He was the victim of someone's evil and of all of our silence." Alicia looked at her with eyes full of tears. "He told me the day before he disappeared. If anything happens to me, it wasn't my fault. I thought he was being dramatic." "Paola," I laughed. Her voice broke and never came back. Paola took her hand firmly but tenderly. "You couldn't have known, dear. None of us could have known." Esteban got up, went to the window, and stared at the rain, gripping the frame tightly, his eyes filled with tears. "I spent my life trying to forget the past, and now the past is here staring at me." He turned to them. "I have to do something. I need you to clear his name." Paola approached him with a calm face. "We will, but first, doctor, he needs to know that he is not alone." At that moment, the door opened slowly, and a nurse appeared. Paola woke up, her heart almost stopping. Esteban stood motionless, speechless. Leandro asked, "Paola?" with a trembling voice. "Yes," replied the nurse, smiling. His eyes are open. He asked for you?" Alicia put her hands to her chest, the tears flowing again. Paola took a deep breath, trying not to cry. Esteban stood still, his gaze lost, as if he still couldn't believe it. Then he whispered, almost without a voice, "He lived through all this." Paola put her hand on his shoulder. "Yes," she said firmly. "And now, doctor, it's time for the truth." The rain continued to fall outside, but inside the hospital, something was beginning to change. The pain, the fear, the guilt. The pain, the fear, the guilt. Everything was transforming into one thing, hope, because finally, what had been buried was beginning to come to light. And with the truth came the first step toward forgiveness. The room was silent, only the soft sound of the monitor filling the air. The morning sun shone through the curtain and drew a golden strip on the sheet. Paola was sitting in a corner, watching with a slight smile, her eyes tired but happy. Leandro, still weak, breathed deeply with his eyes open, trying to recognize the place that had cared for him for so long. His voice was hoarse and raspy, but alive. Where am I?" he asked weakly. Alicia, who was next to the bed, took his hand with both of hers, crying silently with her face pressed against his hand, as if she were afraid to let go and wake up from a dream. "You're in the hospital, love," she replied softly. "At Santa Maria. You've been asleep for a long time." He frowned, confused. "How long?" She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. 7 months. Leandro remained silent, trying to understand. 7 months of nothing. 7 months of silence. His memories were in pieces. The sound of tires, the rain, a flash, and then darkness. He looked at her with eyes full of tears. "I thought I had died." Alicia caressed his face tenderly. "I thought that too." She smiled through her tears. "But I came and found you." He looked at her, as if he were breathing again after being underwater. His voice trembled. "You're still here after all. I waited for you without knowing if you would come back," she said with a tight smile. "Something told me you were coming back." Leandro brought his trembling hand to her face and touched her gently, as if to confirm that she was real. Tears ran down his face. "I hurt you so much," Alicia murmured. "I promised you I would change, and I only made you suffer." She shook her head. "Don't talk about that now. You're here, and that's what matters." He took a deep breath and closed his eyes for a moment. "I'll never leave you again, Alicia. Never again." His voice was firm, though weak. "I already lost everything once. I'm not going to lose it again." She squeezed his hand, moved. "I believe you," she said simply, "because now you believe it too." Silence returned, but it was a beautiful silence, full of peace. Paola, from the corner, discreetly wiped her eyes. Suddenly, the door opened slowly. A soft, heavy step sounded on the floor. It was Esteban. Alicia looked at him, then at Leandro. Time seemed to stand still. Esteban took 2 steps forward, his face pale, his eyes filled with tears. He stared at his son, as if he were seeing a miracle and a wound at the same time. Leandro frowned, not understanding immediately. Time seemed to slow down. Esteban tried to speak, but his voice wouldn't come out. He swallowed and said, "It's me." Leandro looked at him more closely. His heart began to beat faster, although it was weak. The recognition came like a distant memory, an image stored deep in his memory. "Dad," he said softly, as if afraid he was dreaming. Esteban closed his eyes and cried. He approached slowly, his hands trembling. "I should have been with you," he said, his voice breaking. "I should have protected you, listened to you, loved you." Leandro blinked as the tears falling. "I thought you had forgotten me. You never answered." Esteban replied quickly and firmly, "I just didn't know how to come back." He sat down on the side of the bed, took his son's hand, and held it tightly. "Now I understand," Leandro said, looking him in the eyes. "I understand the man you are now, and the child I left behind, and I forgive you." Leandro closed his eyes, tears running down his face, his breathing trembling, his chest rising and fell with a new rhythm full of relief. "Dad," he whispered, "I forgive you too." Esteban rested his forehead on his son's. Neither of them could say anything else. They just stayed there crying, breathing the same air, as if time had stopped to allow for this reunion that life had owed them for years. Alicia watched silently, her face wet, her heart tight. Paola stood at the door, watching with a smile from the soul, that smile that needs no words. Leandro took his father's hand, and Alicia's at the same time, closed his eyes, and murmured in a tired but peaceful voice, "Now everything is fine." At that moment, no one in the room could hold back their tears, because there was something there that neither medicine nor doctors could explain. It was love healing. The hospital was quiet. The sun came in through the windows and cast a warm glow on the floor, as if the day also wanted to celebrate. Inside room 312, it no longer felt the same. It was no longer the room of a patient in a coma. It was the place where 3 lives had been reunited. From the hallway, Paola watched everything from afar. Alicia held Leandro's hands. Esteban sat next to the bed, with his eyes downcast, breathing deeply, as if he were still trying to believe that the miracle had happened. The sound of the monitor was soft, almost like a song. Paola stood at the door, leaning against the wall, and let the tears flow. They were not tears of sadness, but of relief at seeing that love sometimes just needs someone who doesn't give up. A younger nurse passed by and noticed her emotional gaze. "Hey, Paola," he said curiously. "Did you know he was coming back?" She laughed soft, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her gown. She didn't respond with a calm smile, but I felt he needed to hear that someone believed in him. The boy smiled back at her, a little shy, and remained silent. Paola glanced back at the room. Leandro smiled slightly. Alicia cried. Esteban held his son's hand with pride and regret. It was a simple scene, but filled with something that could not be put into words. Paola sighed and thought aloud, as if it were a prayer. Sometimes life just needs an "I believe in you" to start over. She turned slowly and walked down the hall with a light heart, the sound of her footsteps mingling with the soft echo of the hospital waking up. If the story touched your heart, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Write "I believe" in the comments and share your thoughts. Maybe you'll be the one to inspire someone to start over.